He is Marcus Cannon, three-time Super Bowl champion offensive lineman. Hi, Marcus. Welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, man. Yeah, we haven't had you on yet. I was thinking about this. We've been to a bunch of different conferences together and interacted, and yet we hadn't had you on. And here we are. We find ourselves in Colorado, of all places, with an opportunity to sit down and chat. I'm excited to talk to you. Let's kind of start with your journey a little bit. We're at a Christian conference here. So obviously, you're a man of faith. You're on this show. Jesus is important to you. Why don't you walk us through a little bit of how Christ became Lord of your life and maybe the evolution of that?
Well, I'm one of those kids that was always in church with his parents. At a young age, my mom was dragging us to church, and she was actually the secretary for our pastor where I grew up in. Well, I was born in Roswell, New Mexico. We ended up moving to Texas when I was like 11, but those years my mom worked at the church, and she was the secretary of the pastor, and the pastor has a son who's the same age as me. So my whole life has been in the church, whether it was regular or in the summertime. We even were at the church because my mom wasn't going to pay for child care services. She's like, I'm just dragging these guys to the church. And we went to a pretty nice church in Roswell, New Mexico. Yeah. And they had video games, basketball courts, and all kinds of stuff. So there was plenty of stuff for us to do. So, yep, I was always at church.
As you got older and started to become an athlete, when did you start to realize that this football thing, because you're a big guy, I would imagine you were a pretty big guy when you were younger too, but that this football thing was something that you were pretty good at?
Well, it was when I was younger. It's weird because I kind of did like a wave. When I was younger, growing up, the family genes, I was bigger than everybody, like all my brothers were, and faster. And, my dad would have us working out in the summer. So I was bigger, faster, and stronger than kids my age. And then, kids started growing. And then there was like a phase there in between 7th and 9th grade where I was kind of like mediocre. I was really good. And then it was like, kids started catching up, and I was a little mediocre, and then I hit another growth spurt, and then it was just off to the races from there. Yeah. But when I was like 11 or 12 years old, right before we moved to Texas, I remember my dad asking me, kind of, what do you want to do with your life? And it was just me and him in the truck, and we're about to turn down our road, and I said, I want to play in the NFL, and I thought we were going to stop at the house, and he just kept going, and he was like, all right, we're going to have to drive for a little bit. And then he started talking. I have two older brothers.
How old are you at this point when he's asking you this?
Like 11 or 12.
When you're asking him this? 12, okay. Yeah.
And then this is the point where I'm like not as good as I was before when I was growing up. Like I'm starting to hit that span of age where everybody's starting to grow into their bodies and stuff. But he goes and drives, and he's like, it's going to take a little bit for you to reach that level. First off, you're going to have to do a lot better than you are at schooling, because I was one of those kids who's not in bad trouble, but just dumb trouble, like attention trouble, and like not trying as hard at schoolwork. And I sometimes I take plays off and in basketball and football. And so he knew that, and he was like, all right, we're going to have to have a longer conversation. But after that, it seemed like I started trying to work harder, and I started getting better at things. And I don't think I really thought like, all right, I'm probably going to actually be able to make it professional until maybe when I got to college.
Yeah, when you get to TCU. What was your playing peak height and weight in the NFL? How tall are you? 6'7"?
6'6".
6'6". Peak playing weight as a lineman in the NFL.
The highest I ever played, like on paper, was 340.
340.
But
okay.
There was, you know how it is for a lineman. Your actual weight, and then there's your playing weight. So
right. So in the 320 to 340 range. I don't know. I'm just making this up. Or was it pretty high? 330, 340?
At some games I'll play at like 350, and then on Thursday I'd be 335 again.
Just a lot of sweat and a lot of running around, and you drop 10 pounds right there. So I'm guessing you weren't that at that size when you were coming into TCU. You had to kind of figure that out in college. How important for you was it in college you talked about realizing or recognizing it? Maybe I could play in the pros playing for a school like TCU, but like everything, acclimating yourself to being a young man, to being on your own, to falling into the performance side of things, which is so big in sports. All of that. What was that adaptation to college life for you?
It was pretty eye-opening
Yeah.
because you went from kind of a structure with mom and dad, mostly dad, making sure you're staying in shape, trying to eat the right things. And, you get to college and it's like a free-for-all. Like you can eat whatever you want. Like at TCU, at the end, we started having like better nutritionists and stuff like that. But coming in, it's like, all right, here you got a rec card, and then you go into TCU and there's a lot of all you can eat, and you have the money you have, and so you can go to the store and buy whatever you want. And like some guys used to make fun of me because I had like one of those big old 5-pound things of bologna and then a whole bunch of bread because I was trying to do it cheap. But man, I got to like 375 pounds when I was at TCU.
Wow.
But it was a little hard trying to get used to it. But after, I redshirted and then I started getting a little more serious, and they started like trying to let me know, like, look, man, you got to get a little more serious about this. Your weight's getting out of hand. Like, come on, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then it kind of clicked. Like, all right, I'm gonna work harder. I'm gonna get in the weight room more. I'm gonna try to be the strongest I can be, and I'm the fastest I can be, and just do everything the coaches tell me to do, so I can just be the best I can be.
Yeah. And it turned into a long NFL career, which is awesome. And we're going to talk about that career in a minute. But you were a 5th-round pick in 2011 out of TCU, and New England was the team that took that chance on you. And you played there for a long time. But that was not where you wanted to be or where you thought you were going to be drafted. When you look at your story, you're projected much higher. But then a big-time moment in your life happens. I would have to imagine it was probably one of the more significant moments in your entire life when you have a cancer diagnosis. Take us through finding out what happened and just kind of processing that, and even the elements of faith that come into play when you're going through something like that, because never more are we prayerful people in life than when we are faced with adversity, and this is a pretty adverse situation for a young man.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I had a great junior year, great senior year, and we were going into the combine, and my agent was telling me, like, look, everything's looking good. Like, you need to just get these numbers good, and you're probably going to go first round, second round. And I was ecstatic. I was like, all right, let's do it. So, go to the combine. I do pretty good. The numbers are looking good. Just meeting with the coaches is good and everything. But, we get to the end of the medical part, and they're like, everything's good. Before you leave, is there anything you want to talk about, ask us about, any questions? And like, I had this growth on my groin area, like hip area. It looked like a golf ball or a tennis ball. I was like, yeah, I got this weird thing right here. I've had it since I was like 12 years old or something. And they're looking at it and they're like, okay, yeah, you're going to be here a little bit longer. And then we go do some tests and stuff. But, a few weeks later, we find out like that it's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer. But I still remember like being at TCU when I got the call, and they called me because I was still working out. And they called and they're like, hey, I had to go get biopsies and stuff. But they're like, hey, the biopsies come back and you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer. And we're going to have to figure out what the next steps are. And I was devastated. And one part of the story is like, I grew up in the church, and I grew up knowing how to pray, and I grew up like knowing right from wrong, all that. Like, I was saved. I had been baptized, but I let some of that slide when I got to TCU. TCU has so many things for athletes. We have FCA. It's Texas Christian University.
Right.
Man. But, I didn't use all the things that were there to keep me close to Christ. Like, I go to FCA sometimes, and sometimes I would hang out with the guys who were more godly than the other guys, and a lot of times I wouldn't. I was having fun. I was partying and stuff. But when this got dropped on me, I remember first thing I did was I cried first.
Sure.
I called my parents, and then I started to pray. And then I called the pastor, and I drove up to the church where we go as a team, and I tried to talk to the pastor because, like, that's all I had in Fort Worth. But the associate pastor was there. The head pastor was not there, so he prayed with me, and just was like, we prayed, and he was like, it's gonna be all right. But man, it's crazy. Like, after all that, and after all this, like, crying and weeping and praying, like, there was a peace that came over, and it was like, I'm gonna trust God. I'm gonna trust God's gonna get me through this. And we started the treatment and stuff, and I think I had done probably 2 or 3 treatments, and I was talking to my agent, and the draft was coming up, and my agent was like, yeah, probably the best thing right now is going to happen is you're probably going to go unsigned, which is very good. And he's trying to be –
Or undrafted, you mean?
Undrafted.
Yeah.
He's trying to be optimistic, and he's like, yeah, well, see, if you go undrafted, you get to pick wherever you go, and, you could work your way up, and you could probably sign another contract the next year or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember what he said, but I was like, all right, whatever.
That's pretty common, though, when a guy who might not get drafted, it's that I hate to say spin it, but you're spinning it into a positive to try and give the guys some confidence that it's not the end of the world. But for you, after thinking first and second round, I have to imagine that was pretty hard to hear.
Yes, it was hard to hear. And it was so hard to hear. We canceled all the parties and everything that we thought we were going to have. And so I'm sitting at home, and I just I had a biopsy, and they cut some of it out. So I have this scar, and it hurts. It's like my abs are hurting. It's because it's so close. So I'm laying on the couch, and I'm just by myself. I remember my wife, who's my wife now, who's my girlfriend, I think she was working or something, and my parents were out doing something because they had come and check on me the day before. But I'm just laying there by myself, and then my phone rings. I didn't even have the TV on. I wasn't watching the draft. I was like, they're not going to call me.
Yeah.
And then it's Bears and Harry from the Patriots. And he's like, this is Bears. I'm going to put Bill Belichick on the phone. And I'm like, what?
Bill Belichick, right?
So, yeah, he gets on the phone, and he's like, hey, Marcus, we're going to take you in the 5th round. And then he goes and say, we know you're working, you're going through your treatment for the cancer. Like, just don't worry about anything. We're going to get ahead of this, and then once we get ahead of this, then you can worry about playing football. So not only did I get drafted, he was like reassuring me, like, pretty much like, don't even worry about this first year. We're going to pay you, and you're going to be on the team, and
incredible.
We're going to take care of all your health stuff. Been between college and the pros, we didn't have insurance anymore. The insurance from college had ended. So
right.
The doctor, Dr. Uman from Texas Oncology, actually pulled some strings so I wouldn't have to pay $100,000 and something for my treatment.
Incredible. Wow.
They shortened it down quite a bit, and then my childhood pastor helped us come up with the rest of it. But man, like, every step of the way, God was there for me, even though I took 5 years off of, like, going and doing the Christian thing, doing the right thing, doing the godly thing. Like, yeah. He was still there for me when I came back.
Incredible. Marcus Cannon is with us here on Sports Spectrum. If I'm talking to that Marcus Cannon who's laying on his couch watching the draft, presumably, maybe you weren't even watching, it's just all of a sudden the phone rings and it's, the Patriots, would you have believed that you would play 11, 12 years in the league and win 3 Super Bowls? Would that have just been so out of the realm of possibility, and now how you've seen your career arc take shape?
Yes, man, it's crazy.
Yeah.
12, 5 out of the 12 years I played in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It's like
It's a pretty good ratio.
I knew that they were a Super Bowl team. I knew he was a great coach. I knew Tom Brady was awesome. I didn't know where New England was, but I knew that they were awesome. But I never would have thought
Yeah.
that much success would be in my future.
It's so interesting to look at journeys in life, right? And you see, I think just for any person listening, now there's people listening who are probably like, well, I don't have 3 Super Bowls and I'm not big and strong and played in the NFL for more than a decade. But I think when we look back at the journeys that God takes us on, there's always these little pivot moments or these little, what would have happened if it went that way instead of this way? And that phone call and that team picking you during that time in the 5th round instead of letting you go all the way. I mean, they clearly saw something in you because they took you in the 5th round. They could have even taken you in the 7th round, right? But they took you in the 5th round. That team, that scenario, that opportunity to learn and grow under the greatest coach probably of all time and block for the greatest quarterback of all time. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it, but I think it also shows that God's plan is so much better than what we can even dream sometimes.
Yes. Yes. Man, just speaking about God's plan and that, like, we're going to have to do.
It's okay. No, it's okay.
Man, I don't even know what to say to that.
Well, how about this? When you're thinking, because for you to be speechless tells me that there's some emotion here, that there's some gratitude and appreciation for who God is. Sometimes we can't even get that out. You know, there's that song, all I can do is raise my hands and give you a hallelujah, because there's words that, whatever it is, I can't even comprehend how good God's been. Is that fairly accurate in where you are?
Yes, it is.
Right
It's
now?
like I think back over my life up to where we are now, and I know God is, he sent Jesus to die for our sins, but I always go back and I think, like, all of the bad, like all the things that I've struggled with, and it's like God is so good because we can just be these sinful creatures and he still blesses us.
Yes.
Man, it's like I just got done talking to a men's conference, and I had to I was like, I prayed before I went on stage, like, Lord, man, I got this, what I think I'm supposed to say, but speak through me. And in that conference, I ended up being real vulnerable and talking about, like, temptation and routine and faith. And what came out of that was the temptations and stuff in my life that I was dealing with. And I ended up talking to these guys about being delivered from a really bad temptation, like something that I was dealing with since I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
Like something I was dealing with, like I couldn't open a computer without dealing with temptations.
Yep.
And man, I broke down crying. And it's
Right
like
on that stage.
Yeah. And it's like the devil puts these things in your head, like you're not good enough, like you'll never be good enough and you'll never overcome these things. And like I've been delivered, but I'm so thankful that God is there every step of the way with me, and that he cares so much about me to deliver me from these things. And no matter all the crap and like just evil, like he still loves us and he still is there for us and he's still got our back.
That's the most mind-boggling thing to me, I think, about this walk with Jesus is, Paul talks about this. I think it's in Romans, and it might be in Ephesians as well, but he talks quite a bit about being the worst sinner of all. Like Paul says, we are all sinners and I'm the worst of all. And then there's these but God, or and yet, and these moments where even at our worst, I mean, Paul was killing Christians, right? The Apostle Paul, this guy's out there persecuting people who followed, quote unquote, the way, and then he becomes a follower of Jesus and is out there being the greatest spokesperson for Christ that maybe ever existed in some ways when you look at Scripture. And yet God still gave him this grace to say, you know what, I'm going to take all of the temptations that you have, Marcus Cannon. I'm going to take all of the struggles that you've walked through, and I'm not leaving you. I don't like it. I'd like you to stop, but I'm not leaving you. And that's, I think, so hard for so many. You know, for me, I grew up with a dad who wasn't really around much. And like, for me, I didn't have an earthly father to represent to me what this heavenly Father promises to all of us. And to me, that was the hardest thing. Like, man, I mess up too. Those temptations you're talking about, I've had them too. And yet, like, but by the grace of God, I am, right? Like, it's such a beautiful thing. I'm not even going to really, I mean, if you want to respond, you can, but I think it's just beautiful to acknowledge that.
Yes.
Like, God is God, and he doesn't leave us. One of the things that I wanted to ask you about, which has been really interesting, because you played with the Patriots for so many years, you had some really godly guys, some teammates, some mentors, probably even some coaches that I might not know about, but some guys that were there that really were able to be an example to you, to help you, to mentor you. Call out a few of those guys. There'll probably be some recognizable names because a lot of people have been on the show, but call out a few of those guys, that, if you will, that really helped you and mentored you during your time in New England to kind of spiritually prepare you each week and each year.
Man, there's so many. I'm going to forget so many, and I apologize to those guys, and I'm so sorry. But
no, it's okay.
There was like, man, we have a huge room of guys like Matthew Slater, Rex Burkhead, Cody Davis, Ben when he came.
Ben Watson.
Yeah.
I was thinking Devin McCourty.
Yeah. His brother, Jason McCourty.
Yeah.
Gerard Mayo.
So many guys.
Deron Harmon. Man, I'm going to forget some of these guys.
But those guys, you don't even have to name them all, but those names right there, those are guys, they're your brothers obviously on the field. Everybody is your brother on the field to go out and do battle. But there's something about having those spiritual brothers to lift you up when you most need it. And it sounds like New England had that's a thing about New England and a lot of people I don't think realize. Yeah, they won so many Super Bowls and like 20 straight years of winning teams. But there was something really neat spiritually going on in that locker room that you were a part of for almost a decade.
Yes, and there was so much accountability. Like, man, I wish every team was like that. Like, when you're going through something, you have like 15 different guys you can talk to, and you have a great chaplain. Like,
yes,
we had like Jack Easterby, the things that he did in New England, from what it was to what it is now, and how it's changed. Like, there was so many guys that you can go to. Ryan Wendell. I still remember to this day talking about lust with Ryan Wendell, and he just gave me this big hug because I was crying because I prayed in front of these guys like, Lord, just please help me, and I just blurted out lust, and I was talking, and he outside the room he gave me a big hug. But there was always somebody that you can lean on and talk to, and no one judged you. We all knew we were going through the same thing, and we all knew that it was tough. Our lives were tough. Playing on a team was tough. And, man, it was great to have that many godly men and older. Some were older than me. Like, that many godly men that you can trust and you can go to and you can lean on, especially in your times of trouble.
Isn't it incredible that Matthew Slater's still there? Still doing his thing.
There.
Still doing his thing. He's 38 years old. He's still doing his thing. What a spiritual leader, but what a special person.
Yes. He's been saying he's gonna be done playing for about 5 years now. But
he can't quit it, right? What is it? I can't quit you.
No.
Hey, if the Bill Belichick calls and says I still want you on my team, it's hard to turn that down, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard to turn that down. All right, I want to wrap this up with some fun. You played on 3 Super Bowl championship teams, probably the most memorable to me, was the Super Bowl 51 team because it was the greatest comeback in a Super Bowl game, and it's the only game ever to be decided in overtime. When you think back to that game, playing in a game like that, when you're on the offensive line and you're trying to do your job, and let's be frank, the Patriots looked horrible in that first half, but everything turned around, and you guys were a part of something incredibly special. What stands out about that game and being around that team? And I don't know, to me, there's something more satisfying, at least from a fan perspective, in watching your team overcome and come back as opposed to just dominating. By the way, Patriots never really dominated a Super Bowl. They always played close Super Bowl games. This one was a little different. What was it like to be a part of that game?
A ball of emotions. Goodness. But
I can imagine.
It was always something. Like, why can't we get it started? We couldn't get it started, and things were not going our way. But it's a crazy feeling because at no time during the game did we ever feel like we were actually losing. Like, we were losing, but there's sometimes when you're losing, you're like, all right, we got to do something, and like you feel a little down on yourself. Like, there was never a time that it was just like, all right, next play, next series. All right, stay focused. Next series. It doesn't matter what the score is. Next series. We got to the locker room. Bill didn't lose his mind or anything, but the guys we knew. Like, I don't think he lost his mind because everybody knew. There were so many leaders that weren't even called captains, and everybody knew, and everybody was like, all right, we're going to go back out here and we're just going to do the best we can on every play and make sure we do our individual job. And man, did we do our job.
What's really interesting about that game, I'm sorry to interrupt you, was where every little thing, you did your job. That was the motto, right? Do your job. But every little thing has to go right when you go down by that much to make a comeback like that. Whether it's somebody missing a play by inches or the Julian Edelman catch, right? That he's barely catching it off like three players on the other team from Atlanta, or, running the ball or throwing it, I should say, on 3rd and 4 instead of running it and the clock. All of these little things, going for 2 on multiple touchdowns and having to get them to get to the point where you end up having even a chance to win the game. But yet, I think it cemented the legacy. Not that there needed to be a legacy cementing with Belichick and Brady and your whole team, but that game to me cemented everything that you would think about when you look at the New England Patriots as a football team, Bill Belichick as the coach, and just that whole camaraderie. Like, everything had to go right. And when you guys needed to, it did. It's pretty awesome to watch.
It is. And, where it really started was during the season, in the routine, in like what people call the Patriot way. But you had so many people on that team that were willing to come in early, willing to watch film together, willing to hang out with each other. And it was like everybody jumped on to this winning routine. Everybody jumped on to this same thought process. And like that game, winning that game after being down that far started so much further before that game.
Right.
It started during the season when everybody wanted to do everything they could to make sure they were doing the same thing the right way like everybody else was. Like we made sure that everybody had the same routine. Everybody was in this 100%.
Yeah.
And it started way before that game, and it showed. You come back from that big of a deficit.
Yes.
It has to be something special, and it was.
That last play, the touchdown to end the game in overtime, were you on the field for that game or for that play?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually ME'd that play.
Okay.
If you watch it again, I pull around in front of James White, and I'm supposed to cut the guy. But we have a few plays that are like that, and I actually ran another play like that, and James was supposed to come inside, but on the other play, James goes outside. And I outrun this guy, and I almost get called for a holding. But I come out, and then you see me, one arm on this guy, questionable hold.
Sure.
It's not a hold.
Yeah.
They don't throw it. And then James White has to stutter. He stutters because he's supposed to go inside, and then he ends up hitting 3 guys and scoring the touchdown. And man,
So you're on the bottom of that pile too, right? You're near the pile.
oh well, I'm a little bit further because
okay.
then he had to stutter and then cut. So I hit my guy and then slide off. You see me sliding, and then he goes in. I get up and I just take off running when he scored. Because it's over. I'm out of here.
The fastest sprint ever by
yes.
Marcus Cannon, right?
Yeah.
Do you have your Super Bowl rings kept in a certain place? Do you take those out? Do you wear them much?
It's impossible to wear those. They're way too big.
Too big.
They're way
Okay.
too big. So
Yeah.
I take them out for special events, like the men's conference I came from. I took them to show those guys.
Yeah, yeah.
But then I put them back up. It was just like, I love them and I thank God for them, but they're just a bunch of metal.
I was just going to say the cool thing now, if we're really fast forwarding to right now, is that you can have Super Bowls and 11, 12 years in the league and all of these games that you played, and they're all amazing memories, but they don't define you, do they?
No.
What defines you?
God. His plan. And man, coming to PAO, because I wasn't always like this. Man, there's some times in college as well as like being very self-righteous.
Yeah.
But I will say, coming to PAO and then just it has showed me like you got to become less, and it can't be about you. And it's going to be hard for you to hear what God wants to do for you and in your life if you're only worried about yourself. And man, I don't ever want to be like that. Like the joy I feel and the things that God's doing in my life because I'm turning to Him and listening to Him. Man, I'd rather live that way instead of living for myself, because living for myself is just going to end in heartache.
He must become greater, we must become less. He must increase, we must decrease. It's a beautiful motto to live by. You're done playing, sounds like.
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any retirement thing.
Yeah.
I was talking to Bill, and he asked me if I wanted to do it. And he's like, "You see James White?" And I was like, "Oh, Coach, come on, I don't want to do it. I'll do it if y'all want me to." And he's like, "Nope, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to." So
Big old post on social media or something, you're not going to do any of that?
no, I got rid of social media. I had problems with it. So
Good for you. Okay.
So I told Bill, so he knows I've retired in my own heart.
And here people on Sports Spectrum can now hear that you're finished too. But see, what's cool is you're retired, but what are you, 35 years old? You're not retired. You're just done playing football, and it's on to following the next calling from God, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm done with that.
Yeah.
That part of my life.
Well, we're excited to see where God takes you, Marcus Cannon. Thanks for sharing some memories and some stories, and we'll be praying for your brother and excited where God's going to take you. Congrats on a great career, and thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.